Hi, and welcome to Art with Mrs. Torres. Today we are going to be doing an art project inspired by the New York pop artist. His name is Dean Russo. Now, Dean Russo loves animals. Already, I love this artist because he loves to draw dogs, which are one of my favorite animals. We had a dog. His name was Boomer, and he lived for 9 years, and I miss him so much. And it would be really fun to do a project about your pet today. So if you don't have a pet, like I don't have a dog anymore, but I wish I did, then you can just follow along with me and draw a dog with me. Now, if you do have a pet at home, you could turn this into your dog or your cat. It's going to be a fun project, but today I would love you to try working with watercolors. So if you have a set of watercolors at home, I'd like you to gather that up with some water and a crayon and maybe a Sharpie marker if you have it. Now, if you don't have watercolors, you can always just use markers at home like Crayola markers or crayons or colored pencils or anything else that can get some beautiful, vibrant colors. So gather up the supplies you're going to need and then meet me back here and we'll do our project together. It's going to be fun.
Welcome back. Okay, let's get ready to do our project by Dean Russo. That's our inspiration, our pop artist today. Dean Russo loves working with bright colors, and as you can see, he does very dark outlines for his projects. So we want to make sure that we are working very boldly today for our pop art project. Now, before we begin, I'm going to give you some ideas for supplies that you should be looking for. If you happen to have watercolor paper and watercolors, that would be my suggestion for today. Here are a couple different watercolors that I have. I've got a Crayola brand. They work great. I have Prang. Those work great. And I have this set that I got at the art store. And the only reason I'm going to use this one today is it has a few more color choices. However, whatever you have in your house will be wonderful. Now, if you don't have watercolor, you could do this project with crayons. You could do this project with markers. So whatever you have around the house that's going to give you some bright, bold colors, that's what you're going to need. I'm going to be working with watercolor paper. If you are going to be painting today, the other item that you're going to need is some type of paintbrush to go with your paint set, as well as a small cup or bowl of water. I like to work with a bowl. It just helps it not tip over as easy, but we won't be using that until we're done doing our drawing. The other item you're going to be looking for is a marker or a black crayon. Now, I'll be using a jumbo crayon today for the video because it's a little faster for me to do my outline with, but you can use just the regular crayon that comes in your box. You could also use a black Sharpie marker and that will work just as good. So one more thing, if you've got some crayons around the house, get them because we're going to be doing some patterns all over our dog, and the crayon is fabulous for working as a resist alongside of our watercolor paint. So let's go over one more time the things you're going to be looking for. A piece of watercolor paper, paint, and a brush and water if you're going to be watercoloring. If you're not going to be watercoloring, just a piece of paper and something to color with. The other items you're going to need is a Sharpie marker, a crayon, and a set of crayons if you have that. We're going to be using a black crayon for the outlining, or you can use a marker. And then, of course, a pencil and an eraser. So pause the video, go gather those items up and meet me back here, and we will begin our dog picture. Welcome back. Let's get ready to start our drawing of our dog. So I'm going to be using a pencil for just a few little parts of the dog. And then I'm going to take the pencil away and do everything that's big detail with my crayons. Okay, so first thing we want to look at is the shape of the face that we're going to be drawing. So we're going to be doing a circle for the nose, a wonderful long tongue. That's just an oval shape. We're going to be drawing a circle for the head. We're going to be drawing kind of a leaf shape for the ear. And by the way, if you have your own picture of your own dog and you would like to do the same design, you don't have to follow along with me. You could get a photograph of your dog and copy your dog. So let me show you how Dean Russo works. So artists around the world are so inspired by his work because he does this creative thing. So he will find a photo of a dog or a cat or a rabbit or an elephant, and then he takes that drawing and then he draws the drawing matching the original photograph of the drawing. And then he goes in with this amazing colors and patterns and detail. And look at all that line work and all those fun colors that he uses. So this is how he does his project. He starts out with a photograph. He traces the drawing onto watercolor paper or transfers it onto the watercolor paper. And then he goes into all the detail using color. So for today, to keep things simple, I don't want you to worry about the drawing looking just like this dog. We're just going to kind of have fun and go with it, okay? So the first thing we're going to do is find the center of our paper like we always do. We're going to make a dot in the center of the paper. This is going to give us our placement. So if you look at the center of the picture here, that's kind of right at the tip of the nose, right here at the bottom of the nose. So right here, from this spot here, we're going to start with the nose. I'm just going to draw a rounded circle to begin with for the nose. And as I'm drawing, I'm going to be drawing darker than you should be drawing because I want you to be able to see the line in my filming. At home, you should be drawing nice and light. Next, I'm going to come right here to the bottom and draw a short line coming down. This is going to be the bottom portion of the nose of the dog. And we're going to get ready to draw nostrils next. So I'm going to come up here and I'm just going to bring a line coming in from the side. I'm going to lift it around and bring it back, kind of like a teardrop. I'm going to match it on this side, doing the same exact thing. And then I'm going to round the side of the nose on both sides. And then for the bottom here, I'm going to round that corner here and round this corner here. I'm going to go in with my magic rub and erase the lines I don't want to keep. And once I've got the placement of the nose, then I'm going to draw the muzzle of the dog around the nose. So I'm going to start here from the bottom and draw a short line down, not very long. I'm going to gently curve a line coming this direction and gently curve a line going this direction. Now don't make this too dark. Then I'm going to wrap this line around and I'm going to taper it back toward the top of the paper like this. So it's going to kind of form an upside down heart shape. Okay, once I make this curved shape, it's kind of like an upside down heart shape. Then I'm going to come in here and start to draw a big long tongue that's going to come down. So I'm going to bring a line coming from both sides here. And then I'm going to round it around at the bottom. And a dog's tongue actually has a small kind of divot at the corner like that in the bottom. And then I'm going to draw that long line of his tongue coming down. And then I'm going to come up here to the top. And I'm going to get ready to draw the top of this head. So I'm going to go way up here above this section here, and I'm going to make a nice curved shape at the top. Make sure that you have enough space up here for his head. And then I'm going to bring it around and connect it at the bottom. Now, as I'm drawing this, it's going to change once we add the ears. So right now I'm going to check my size of my cheeks on both sides and make sure they're even. And then I'm going to add ears. So I'm going to come over here to the side and I'm going to make a big curve that comes up. It's going to come off the edge of the paper, back down. And you'll decide how long you want the ears to be on your dog, because this is just for fun today. It does not have to match the image that he drew. We're just kind of having fun. Now you could decide whether you want the ear to be kind of a little bit in front of your dog's face or behind his cheek. It's really up to you. I'm going to match it on the other side by drawing the same thing. Little line that comes up for the top of his ear. Mine's going off the edge of the paper, and then it's going to come back in. And I'm going to line it up kind of even with the other one. And then up over the face, and then back around. So now I'm going to kind of check to make sure my ears are in the same location. So the way I do that is I take my paper and I turn it upside down. When you turn the paper upside down, you are now looking at your picture, but your brain is a little confused by doing this. You are actually using your left side of your brain now, your logical side of your brain, and you are seeing this as just a shape. It's not necessarily a dog's ear. Your right side of your brain, your creative side of your brain. So when you turn your paper upside down, all your eye is seeing is that a shape is longer than the other shape or wider than the other shape. So when I do this, I can kind of place my pencil and see that one ear is quite a bit longer than the other ear. So I can either shorten one ear or lengthen the other ear. So I'm going to lengthen this ear to make it match. I'm going to check that both my ears are about the same width. I'm going to check down here at the bottom, which is really the top of the head, and make sure that the ears are starting at the same location. So I can take my pencil and kind of check my work there. That's pretty close. Then I'm going to rotate my paper back around. And now I'm going to remove the sections that I don't want. So I'm choosing to make my dog's ears in front of his cheek, but you might be making his ears tucked behind his cheek. Just depends on how they're flopping. All right, once my ears are done for my dog, I'm going to go up here and I'm going to draw a big wide neck coming down. That's going to go all the way off the bottom of the paper. And you want to make sure, because his shoulders would be there also, that as you are drawing this down, it's starting to come out to the edges of the paper like this. You want almost like his shoulders. Now we're going to come up and do the most important part of our dog, and that is his eyes. I want to make sure that you are ready to do his eyes, that you are not hurrying to do that. That's the most important part of your picture. So as I'm looking right here, I want to make sure that this muzzle on this side is the same distance from the side of his face as this one. So I already can see a problem in my picture. You may not see it yet, but I can see mine. And right now, when we measure with my fingers, you're going to see it too. All right, so it looks pretty good. I'm almost ready to draw my eyes, but I always wait because look, if I put my finger right here next to that part of my nose and I count my fingers over here, it's about 2 and maybe a half of a finger on this side. But if I put my fingers on this side where my muzzle ended, 1, 2, 3, whoa, 3.5 fingers. That's a pretty big, significant difference between this side of the face and this side of the face. So that means I need to correct this line before I move on. Good thing you helped me catch that right now. So I'm going to correct that little spot right there. Now, by the way, if I was drawing this in my art studio and you weren't here with me, I would not be drawing this dark. I would be drawing much lighter. But I've noticed that on the camera, I have to draw a little darker so that you can see my pencil work. So if you see me kind of going over lines and making them darker, don't copy what I'm doing. You don't want to make your lines darker. You want to keep your lines nice and light. So I'm going to actually extend his ear out a little wider too, so it matches this ear. So I'm going to make his ear a little chubbier on this side. Then I'm going to recheck my work by putting my fingers here. 1, 2.5, 1, 2, 3. I still need to go a little bit more over. See how that works? Pretty cool, huh? By the way, I never use a ruler when I'm doing my work. I'm always checking my work. All I use is my fingers. Okay, here we go. Now it's time to place our eyes. So when we're doing our eyes, let's look at this original drawing. Not that we're copying it, we're just kind of being inspired by it. We're noticing that the eyes are going to make a rainbow shape up at the top and then a gentle curve down below. All right, simple, simple, simple. So I'm going to go over here, figure out where I want to place my eyes. We don't want them really low. I kind of use my fingertips as my placement. So figuring out where my eyes need to go, I'm going to go on this side and I'm going to draw a rainbow curve on this side. I'm going to match it on this side. Now, once I do that, okay, already my dog is so cute, right? Come on, I could keep it just like this and have his eyes closed and it would be adorable. Add some eyelashes over here and then move right on to my outlining and my painting. And that would be great. So you could stop right here and keep your dog looking like this if you want to. But if you want to open up the eyes, then you're going to go right here underneath that rainbow shape and you're going to now draw the lower eyelid. So I'm just going to come around and back up and around and back up. Now this takes me a few times. I usually am erasing a few times in between here, just trying to get the shapes the same. You want to make sure the eyes are the same size as you're doing this. And then once you're happy with your work, then you're going to move on to the iris, the colored part of the eye, and then the pupil. So the iris is going to fill the whole space in here. So I'm just going to go like this. That's going to be the colored part of my dog's eye. In this picture, he painted the dog's eye brown. And then the pupil. Now, to make our dog look really cute, we got to make a large pupil, really big. So it's almost a full circle. So just a tiny bit of that brown iris is going to show later. I know he looks kind of strange right now. It's because we haven't put the highlight in. And then the highlight circle is going to be up here. Now, always make that highlight circle larger than you think it needs to be. I'm always telling my students to make it larger because once you go to color in your pupil, then this is going to get smaller, especially if you're working with a marker or a crayon. Now, what I do to remind myself which part is the pupil, I just go in and very lightly brush my pencil along that pupil next to the highlight. Now we're going to add an eyelid. So we're going to come over here to the side and just retrace the top part of the eye. I'm going to do the same thing on this side. I'm coming right from this side, up and around and back. And then we're going to do a little lower lid the same way. We're just going to make a little indentation underneath here. All right, and then right up here, the dog's got a couple wrinkles in his forehead. So I'm just going to go like this and draw just a few little curves. Now, of course, my dog looks kind of bald because we haven't put any hair on his forehead yet. We will add hair when we get to our outline. And then we're going to have all this space down here to do some fun patterns in. All right, now we need the lower part of the jaw underneath. So I'm just going to bring a line right under here, and right under on this side to match. And then we're going to go ahead now and put our pencil aside, take our magic rubber eraser and erase any of the lines that we don't want to keep anymore. So I don't need this part of his head anymore. Erase that. I have a couple little lines in his ears that I need to remove. And now we're going to get ready to do our outlining. So for today, I had given you a couple options. One option would be to use a Sharpie marker. Another option would be to use a black crayon. I'm going to be using a crayon today, and then I'm going to be going over my crayon with this big chubby crayon just to save time for the video. If you're doing this at home, you're just going to use your black crayon and you're going to go over your outline more than one time. So it's a nice, thick, bold outline, just like his work. Okay. So now let's get ready to start tracing over our lines. So I would prefer my dog to be furry, not a smooth line, just the way that Dean Russo makes his dogs furry. Every once in a while, I'm just going to kind of flick my crayon out as I'm outlining. So I'm going to come up here to the top of his head, and I'm going to start on this side, and I'm going to start by making a few little furry marks up at the top. I'm going to make his ears pretty fluffy and furry. And as I'm tracing his ear at the bottom, I'm going to do the same thing. You notice I'm just kind of taking my crayon. This is why I really like working with crayons, because you really can get some fun texture with your crayon that you just can't do with other tools. Then I'm going to go over here to his shoulders, make those nice and furry. And I'm going to be a little bit more careful when we get up to his face. So I'm going to start now working with his muzzle. So when I get around to his muzzle, I'm not going to make it as fuzzy. I'm going to do that a little bit more careful. This is just my first go around. I will darken these lines later. And then once I've got that line down, I'm going to go back over my line. And with the jaw, this lower chin, I can make that furry. So when you're tracing the tongue, you'll notice he made the tongue get a little bit wider at the bottom, so it really looks like it's kind of popping out of the paper. So if you want to make the tongue just a little bit chubbier at the bottom, you can. And then you can draw that little fold in the tongue. And he doesn't bring it all the way to the bottom. He kind of stops just before the bottom. This is going to be great when we color it later. But for now, what I want you to do, give me a second. We'll do that in a minute. Go ahead and keep tracing. I'm getting ahead of myself here. So keep tracing all of your shapes. Now you've got to be really careful when you get up to the eye. You're using a crayon especially. That's why I asked you to work kind of big on those circles. And when I use that pencil, that helps to remind me what part is the pupil. Don't forget to trace the eyelid. And then when you're done tracing all of your lines, then we're going to go in and retrace everything a little darker. Now don't forget the side of his face here. Now, if you have a lot of space down here at the bottom, you could always add a collar later, but I like to leave it open so that I can have more room to do all these fun patterns. Okay, once you're finished drawing your dog and you've outlined everything, you want to go in and you want to darken the nostrils. You want to darken your pupils if you haven't already done that. And then you're going to want to add a little shading on the tongue right close to where his muzzle is. So I'm just going in very softly with my black crayon and just coloring a little shading there. Okay, another place that you're going to want to add a little shading is right here on the corner where his eye is. And then in between these wrinkles, just kind of add just a little shading where the wrinkles are. And then here and here where the ear is, you can just put a little shadow. We're going to be painting over this later. Okay, so now everything that you've drawn needs to be outlined a second time. You want those outlines very thick, bold black. It's going to take you a little time to do that with your crayon. I'm just going to switch over to this crayon to show you how thick of a line I want you to work at doing. So I'm just doing this for the video's sake, just so you can see how quickly I can do it with this chubbier crayon. Now, most people don't have a big fat crayon in their house, so you can do the same exact thing with your regular crayon. And you're going to go through and you're just going to have to do it a couple more times as you go around every single line and make it a big, bold, dark outline. So you want to take a little bit of time now and go over every single line, the tongue, the cheeks, the nose, the muzzle. Don't worry about the eyes, the shoulders, and retrace everything until it's a big, thick outline. So I'm going to pause the video now. Go ahead and work on that. Pause the video. Come back when everything's outlined nice and dark black. Okay, now you've retraced everything. You've got some nice, bold, dark black outlines for your work. I have a couple other places that you might want to add a little shading, and that would be right here in the underside of his nose, at the bottom of his muzzle right here. You can add a little shading at the bottom of his nose. You can add a little shading around the bottom of his muzzle. And then right here underneath his face, where his head would be connected to his neck, this would also have a shadow on it. All right, we are ready to start doing some fun pattern work. So we're going to be trying to copy the way that Dean Russo does his fun patterns. Now, I'm going to give you some choices here. You do not have to use black as your outline. I had recommended having a set of crayons with you because you can experiment and do patterns with all different colors. We're going to be painting later with lots of color. So instead of just working with black, I would recommend grabbing some other fun colors and starting to do some fun, crazy patterns all over your dog. So let's experiment first with the chest. So we're going to come down here to that big bold area and we're going to start to make a few swirls. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take a dark color for my outline. I'm not using black. I'm going to try this blue color. And I'm going to just start by making a swirl. Now don't go too crazy with the swirl because we have to do it twice. We're going to do it the first time. I'm going to retrace that line so it's nice and dark. And then I'm going to draw a second one right next to it. So I'm going to come over here and it's going to be kind of like an elephant trunk. I'm going to retrace. I'm following the same curve around. And then when I get in here, I'm going to connect it at the end. So now it becomes one swirl that I can fill a pattern in later. So once I've done it one place, you're going to not change crayons until you've used this color 6 times. So now I'm going to go over here and do something else with it. You notice I keep that swirl pretty basic. I don't go too swirly with it because I have to go back and retrace that line a second time right next to it. And then I'm going to go over those lines one more time just to darken it. And then while I have this color in my hand, I want to use it 6 times. So that's 1, 2, I've got 4 more to go somewhere else. And it doesn't have to be the same pattern. It can be a different pattern if you'd like to. For me, I'm going to keep things simple by just repeating that pattern in 6 different locations on the dog. We're going to keep doing this and repeating and repeating and repeating, and then it's going to end up being so beautiful when we're finished. Go back over those lines one more time. If you didn't already, do it dark. And then when you're done, and you've done it 6 times, you're going to put that color back in your cup. We'll come back to it later. And you're going to try a different color. So try something else. And now you can make another style pattern. You don't have to copy the same pattern. You can do something different. So he does a lot of different shapes and patterns in his work. So you might see circles or triangles or squares or rectangles. And then he does these organic shapes where he just kind of has fun with his marker or paints or whatever medium he's working with. So for instance, I could go in here and make this organic shape like this. Repeat it by retracing my steps to make it darker. And that's once. I'm going to use the same color and that same pattern on my picture in a few more spots. So try to do about 6 of each pattern and the same color. And as you're doing it, spread it out in your picture as well. Make sure you're spreading that pattern out. It's not all just jumbled up in one spot. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Now don't put that color away. Now while you have the same color in your hand, you're going to go over to one of your first colors and you're going to draw some kind of pattern with this second color in your first color. So it doesn't have to be the same in all of them. So you could do squares in one and rectangles in another and stripes in another. And it doesn't have to be in all of them, but just use it into a few of them. Now, if you follow this step, what I'm doing right now, you're going to finish your project much faster than if you were to use your color once and put the crayon away and then a different color and then a different color. It'll take you way too long. Okay, I'm on to color number 3, new pattern, trying something different. So this time I'm going to be making long organic finger shapes. Firm pressure, making sure that you get a nice good coat of wax down on your picture. So you kind of get the hang of this now, right? So I'm going to have you pause the video. You're going to fill your dog with patterns. And inside each one of those shapes, you need to do a different pattern. So for instance, make sure that you're adding maybe some stripes. They don't have to be colored in because we're going to be using paint later, but just get some fun colors throughout your picture. And then come on back, start the video again when you're done putting pattern all over your dog. Okay, I'm not going to be putting any pattern on the tongue. I want the tongue to be more simple and I want the nose to be more simple, just the way he did his. But everything else I'm going to be putting pattern in. All right, pause the video and meet me back here when you are done. Let's begin doing our painting now. So you can see that I kind of had lots of fun creating all kinds of patterns in here. I kept my nose and my tongue blank so that I could just paint a more simple color. I did some repeating patterns. I did some dots similar to the way that Dean Russo did his. And the other thing is, if you want to color the iris of your eye while you have your crayons, you can do that now, or you can wait and try to paint that later. I think I'm going to go in and color the color of my eyes right now with my crayon, only because I don't think I can get my paintbrush in that small spot. I'm going to be adding just a little bit of brown to the eye, and then of course I'm going to golden mine up a little bit with yellow and orange. I never lay brown down by itself. I always add a little color to it to warm it up. Okay, let's get ready to do our painting now. So for our painting, we're going to be using our watercolor paint set. We're going to be moving our crayons off to the side, getting our area all cleaned up and ready. So I'm going to be opening up my paint set. And before we start, we want to make sure that we add some water on top of each one of our paint colors. Now, if you haven't worked with watercolor paints with me before, one of the rules I have with watercolor is that we never paint with the actual paint. We only paint with the water that is floating on top. So before we begin, if you are right-handed, your paint set needs to be on your right-hand side, and the water bowl needs to be directly above it. You should be also having a napkin near you or paper towel that's folded up, and that's going to be for blotting your paintbrush in between water changes. So I'm going to make sure I got all my stuff ready. I'm a left-hander, so everything's over here on this side. So the first thing we're going to do is clean our brush and slide your brush up the side of the bowl so that we don't tap our brush on top. And we're going to be adding some drops of water to the lightest color that we're going to be using, which will be yellow. So in your paint set, I do not want you to be using white or black today. So the first color is yellow. Now you'll notice I'm only tapping water on top of the yellow, so it's floating. I am not stirring it with my brush. My brush is actually staying really clean because I'm not really stirring it around. I'm going to move in and put water on top of every color I plan on using. And as you notice, I'm trying to get my lighter colors wet first, just so that my water doesn't get real dirty. Now, once I have laid some water on each one of the colors I want to use for my dog picture, that water, as it's sitting there on top of the paint, it's starting to loosen up the paint underneath, and those colors will mix together very nicely, and we won't have to dig our brush into the paint set. We're just going to be painting by tickling our brush onto the water that's floating up above our paint set. Okay, I've got all my colors with a little bit of water on it. If you don't yet, go ahead and pause your video and do that, and then come on back, turn it on whenever you're ready. So to get ready to paint, the first thing I'm going to be working with is the lightest color. That way I don't dirty up my water, and that's going to be yellow. So I'm not going to stick my brush into the yellow. I'm just going to very lightly, gently brush it across that water that's floating on the top. So I'm kind of adding a little bit of stirring motion so that I get that water that's floating have a little bit of the color that's underneath the pigment. I'm going to take this yellow and I'm going to find one whole big space and paint it yellow. So I'm not going to be painting one tiny little circle. I'm going to grab something that's large and paint an entire area with that yellow. Now, just like we did with the crayons, you are going to go 6 times with this yellow in 6 different locations. So that could be one whole portion of the ear, or it could be just one section like this. So quickly go around and fill in 6 spaces with your first color, which is yellow. 1, 2, 3. I think I'm going to do this whole top part of his head. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to grab a little bit more water on my brush. 5. And then 6. I'm going to do something up on this ear. 6. Okay, so we're going to let that color dry. So the next color that we grab, we're going to make sure that we don't paint it anywhere near those colors we just did, because we want those colors to dry. We don't want the 2 colors to mix together, and it's okay if they do. So now I'm going to move on to an orange. So that's my next lightest color, is this orange. I'm going to move on with a little bit of the water. Remember, you're not jamming your brush down into the paint. You're just tickling it over the color, and you're kind of twirling it around to get that color on your brush. And then I'm going to find a big space and color it orange. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to fill a larger area in with this orange. So I'm going to kind of color in between these spaces with the orange. And if that color is looking really dark, just dip the tip of your brush into the water and then keep painting. And then you can pull that really dark color out. We want to be able to see your crayon work underneath. So if you might have grabbed a little bit too much pigment, which normally happens when you're working with the darker colors, you can always just go like this and get a little bit more water, wipe your brush up the side of the bowl, and that can kind of help dilute the color. All right, so 6 times with your color number 2. We're working fast. We're not worrying about it being perfect. It's okay if the colors kind of run together later as we keep getting more and more color. That's 1, 2, 3. I got to do 2 more. I think I'm at 4, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Rinse my brush, and now I'm going to move on to the next color. So I'm going to stay in these warm tones. You can bounce all around your color palette if you'd like to. I'm going to kind of work with the warm tones first. That way I kind of hold my paint water from getting too dirty. So I'm going to be painting some big areas. And by the way, check this out. As I'm working, you can paint right over the crayon because the crayon is a wax base and it's going to repel the paint. So as you're working with your color, don't worry if you paint over something because your oil pastel will come through. It will, I'm sorry, your oil pastel, your crayon. By the way, oil pastel would work just the same. Today we're working with crayons, but oil pastels do the same. The only reason we're working with crayon today is we can get a little bit tighter detail with a crayon versus oil pastel, which is a little thicker. It's a little harder to get the tiny details that we needed for the eye in there. So as you can see, I'm just going to be moving my paintbrush around with my color and filling in 6 spots and then moving on to a different color and another color and another color until my whole dog is filled in. So at this point, I'm going to let you experiment with your colors and paint, and then you're going to pause the video, go ahead and finish painting your dog, and meet me back here when you're done, and we will compare our work. All right, pause the video and keep going. Well, I am finished with my painting. How about you? I used a lot of different colors. I had fun kind of experimenting, mixing some different colors together. I even tried something different. I went like this and I wet my paper just a little bit. I added the pink like this. And then I went in and I added a little bit extra pink right up here where the shadow is. Now, because my paper is wet in just that tongue area, I can manipulate the paint with a wet paintbrush because just this one section is wet, and I can pull that darker color down. So I could also even go in and add a tiny drop of blue to cause a little bit darker shadow. Now the blue mixing in with that pink, it's going to make a really pretty purple. Once again, with the water on my brush, I can manipulate that paint and pull it down the tongue. I can also do the same trick up here on the nose. If I wanted the bottom part of the nose to be a little darker, I can wet the nose again. I would wet the whole nose again. And it's away from my tongue, so those two colors aren't going to mix together. And I could add a little bit darker blue to the bottom of the nose, rinse my brush off and wet it. And then with a damp brush, I can just kind of manipulate that color up into the top of the nose. And so it's lighter at the top and a little darker at the bottom. Well, I hope you had fun today learning about Dean Russo and doing our project. I have a couple ideas for you when you're finished. You can leave your background white, or it would be really neat to cut your background out and mount it onto a colored piece of paper. Black would be a wonderful color to mount it onto, or another color. And then one more thing. Do you notice how it says dog is love? This would be really fun if you have some room up at the top. One of the things that Dean Russo is known for is he always hides little words in his artwork. So you might want to write something about your dog or something about dogs and put just a few little words around using your marker or crayon, and you could even paint over it, just like we did the dog, to give it kind of that resist effect. Well, I hope you had fun today. I had so much fun teaching you, and I would love to see your artwork. Please send me an email to rtorres@lcusd.net. I would love to see your finished picture of your dog. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.